Hello guys and welcome to Chess with me. Today we'll be going over 15 checkmates you have to know to be able to improve at chess. This is just going to be a quick intro and let's begin. The Fool's Mate. The Fool's Mate is a checkmate that usually only people who don't know the game would fall for, essentially. So the Fool's Mate usually goes f3. I mean, black could also fall for it like this way, but f3, e6, g4, queen h4 checkmate. The bishop cannot go forward, nothing can block. The king is stuck, we are being attacked by the queen, nowhere to move, so it's checkmate. The Scholar's Mate. The Scholar's Mate is a fun little beginner checkmate that people who are beginners usually fall for. So it goes e4, e5, bishop c4, bishop's game, bishop c5, copying, and you play queen h5. I mean, queen f3 is also fine, but he just goes f6 and he's okay. Yes, there's check, but he just blocks. So I suggest queen h5, where if he happens to play g6 thinking he stops the checkmate, there's queen e5. Queen takes e5 check with a fork on the king and the rook. If he plays knight f6, however, just normally developing and has nothing suspects nothing, then you take on f7 and it's checkmate. The Arabian Mate is a coordination between the knight and the rook, where here you play rook g8 checkmate, and the king's only escape square is taken by the knight. Here is an example game by Levon Aronian and Vasily Ivanchuk, where here Levon Aronian played e5. The game is between Levon Aronian and Vasily Ivanchuk. They played this game on the 19th of Feb 2006. This is round 2 of the Morelia Linears, if I pronounced that correctly. Here, Vasily Ivanchuk played a great move, knight e6, where if you take it's checkmate by force with rook g8 checkmate. So instead, Levon Aronian played e takes f4, where you sacrifice your rook. The reason you do this is because if you move your king, it's still checkmate via the same way. But if he takes with the rook, you play rook b8, where here you have the Arabian Mate. The escape square is covered by the rook, and the king's other escape square is taken by the knight, as seen over here. Legal's Mate. Legal's Mate occurs after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, which is the Italian game, d6, knight c6, and bishop g5, where here you play knight takes e5, it's completely sacrificing your queen. However, if they take your queen, you play bishop takes f7, opponent's only move is king e7, and you have knight d5 checkmate, where all the king's escape squares are covered by your knights and bishops. However, this can easily be avoided with knight takes e5, so I would not suggest playing this if you're not in the very beginner level, I would say. So probably 500-600 elo, I would say, is the cap. Some people do fall for it because they don't really, you're not really calculating anything there. You're more focused on, for example, your opening principles. And yeah, that is Legal's Mate. Next is back rank checkmate. Back rank checkmate is the most common checkmate where your king has no breathing. Because of this, that's why people usually play like prophylactic moves such as h3, so they don't have any chance of being back ranked anytime soon. Where here black has not played h3, so we can play queen takes e8, sacrificing the queen, rook takes e8, rook takes e8, where the black king is checkmated. He cannot move anywhere because he is stuck behind his pawns, and the rook delivers the checkmate. Next up is the smothered checkmate, which I would say is the most fun checkmate in chess, or the most exciting in my opinion. So the smothered checkmate occurs when you have your queen staring at the square next to where the king is. For example, the king is on h1, h8, and your queen stares at h7. I mean, the rook doesn't necessarily have to be on f8, it could be more or less anywhere. It's just that if the rook is anywhere, for example, let's put it this, you will still have the checkmate, except some people out of spite, well, not really out of spite, it's just more like they don't want you to have the checkmate. So instead of going back to h8, they'll go to h6, where you have queen g6 checkmate. But with the smothered mate, since the rook is on f8, some people would take just because they know they're losing. But if some people, well, you'd be lucky if so you get someone who plays king g7. So there's king g7 and you play knight h6 check, which is a double check by both your knight and your queen, meaning that the king itself has to move. He plays king h8. Now with the knight covering the g7 square, you play queen g7, giving up your queen to smother the black king in the corner. Now, I have an example game of how the smothered mate works. This is a game I played on the 14th of July, so about 10 days ago from the recording of this video. It was a 15 plus 10 game. It's a training game. I did not post it because I haven't posted for like the last week or so, I think. So I'll just skip to roundabout where it occurs. Think about here. Okay. So my opponent just played knight e2. This is a good move. It's one of the ways it stops the checkmate. For example, if I continue to try the checkmate and I sacrifice my queen, he has knight takes g7. Not knight takes g7, knight takes g1. Knight takes g1 completely stops the checkmate, because if I try to smother the king, he takes, I take, and it is checkmate. I myself am being mated. So that's why I mean, I still go with knight a6. It's just that I take the rook first. It'll be checkmate, so he has to take back, and I play knight f2 check again. He plays king g1, and I play rook f8. This is so I can still go for it. I don't know. I don't remember what I have planned here. I mean, if I look at it for a bit more, but I do not want to prolong the video. So for some reason he plays knight g3, where now the smothered mate is completely allowed of the knight h3 check, with as well as the double check on the queen, so the king itself has to move. He goes king h1, queen g2, rook takes g2, and rook f2, checkmate with the king smothered in the corner. Anastasia's mate is another checkmate between the coordination of a knight and a rook. So usually the knight would usually take out the escape squares of the king, while there would need to be, for example, a pawn or a piece here that cannot block the checkmate. For example, in in this example, you can go knight e7 check, king h8, sacrifice your queen on h7, king takes h7, rook h4, checkmate. The knight blocks the escape squares and the checkmate is delivered by the rook. It is like a back rank mate because the knight blocks, so you could essentially think of this as a back rank. Here is an example of a game where black has just played king e7. This game is by Ernest Falkbeer and Conrad Bayer in 1852. So Conrad Bayer took on a8 and white plays knight e2 check, king h1, queen takes h2. Only option is king takes h2 and rook h4 check, where the knight blocks the escape squares, rook delivers checkmate as seen over here. The next checkmate is Epaulet's mate. So this is essentially where the king is basically, how would you put it, squashed by his own two pieces, and you play queen e, well in this example it's queen e6 checkmate, where the queen blocks all the escape squares and the king is blocked in by his own pieces. Boden's mate. Boden's mate is usually, well, it's a checkmate between two bishops where they cover all black's escape squares. However, there must also be some of black's own pieces covering the escape squares as to where the king cannot escape. Where here the only move for checkmate is bishop a6. It's a clean checkmate by both bishops, blocking the king's escape squares. Now here is an example of Boden's mate. This is a game played in 1961. I'm not really sure where, but it's by Alistair M. Fraser and F.A. Stroud. The game starts with d4, d5. I'll just skip to a bit of the moves for you. And it is here. So here, black plays the amazing queen takes c3. So as you can see, the bishop covers the king's light squares and the rook covers the king's left side. So your only move here is to take, and you play bishop a3, Boden's mate, with the rook covering this escape square, the bishop's covering these one, and the king being blocked in by his own rook. As you can see, it's delivered by the two bishops, as you can see over here as well. The Dovetail Mate. The Dovetail Mate is not really common, somewhat common you could say, where the checkmate essentially looks like a dovetail. So here, for example, queen f6 was mate, where g8 and h7 are black's own pieces blocking the escape squares. The mate essentially just looks like a dovetail. That's why it was named after. Now I have an example game of the Dovetail's Mate. This is a game played by Giacchino Greco, correct me if I'm wrong, and Double N. I don't know if this means he's anonymous, but it did not supply the name, and I don't know where this game was played as well, although I do know it was played in 1620. So the Dovetail Mate is here. So white plays queen f3 check. Black cannot block with the queen, otherwise it's checkmate. He cannot block with the knight because it's the same thing. So here black plays king g7 and you play, oh sorry, no, you take, so you take the knight first. Sorry, my bad. The reason why you take the knight is because it's blocking the f6 square in which you need to deliver the Dovetail Mate. Rook takes, and you play queen f6, checkmate with the same dovetail mate as before. Next up is the swallowtail mate, where the mate just essentially looks like a swallow's tail. It's very similar to the dovetail. Yeah, it's literally just similar to the dovetail. I think they called it a swallow's tail just because it looks like the tail of a swallow. This mate is done by the queen with the support of a pawn. It could as well be a bishop. The upper mate is done by the rook and the bishop, where the bishop covers the king's dark squared escape. The king in this example goes to d8 and gives a checkmate, while e7 is blocked by the bishop. Morphy's mate. Morphy's mate is a mate that could be done when you have a windmill-like position. For example, a windmill is when you take on g7, king h8, and you just continue checking. Usually people just like to maybe clear the position. It can be seen as like a very embarrassing strat for the other person because they literally cannot do anything else. So Morphy's mate comes after rook takes g7, king h8. It's important to take f7, rook takes f7. It's important because if you immediately go rook g3, he has f3 and the mate is no longer available. So you need to take f7 first. He plays king g8. You give the check again to force the king back to h8. And then rook g3. You could really go on any other place as long as it cannot be taken, which is essentially checkmate after rook f6, bishop takes f6, where all the escape squares is covered by the rook, and the bishop delivers the checkmate. Damiano's mate. I'm sure most of you have already had this mate before. It's where the pawn takes away the king's escape squares and you get mated by the queen. Blackburne's mate. Blackburne's mate is similar to Boden's mate, where you are getting checkmated with the bishops. But the difference with the Blackburne's mate is that there is no pawn here. So the escape square is covered by the knight. When you play bishop e5 checkmate, you cannot go king h7 because it is blocked by the knight. Very similar to Boden's mate. And yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if I have made any mistakes, in which I do make a lot, please do not forget to advise me in the comments. If you want another one, if you want another video like this one, comment down below. I will most definitely see it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. That is 15 checkmates you have to know. Yeah, that was Chess with me.